Good afternoon and welcome to today's Georgetown Alumni webinar sponsored by the Georgetown University Alumni Association. Thank you for taking time out of your day to connect virtually with fellow Hoyas for today's webinar, Growing Body Confidence with alumna María Luisa Mendiola. María Luisa is a Costa Rican body image champion who has worked in community building and diversity and inclusion for the last 10 years. Her personal experience with disfigurement led her to found Miga Swimwear, the first swimwear line inspired by women's stories with disfigurement, disabilities, and chronic illnesses, contesting the stigma of looking differently and disrupting commonly held beauty standards. In 2018, Mendiola raised upwards of $10,000 to produce Miga's first collection, inspired by the stories of burn survivors. She has frequently spoken on topics such as disfigurement and disability inclusion and its intersections with gender, self-concept, policy, and the workplace. Previously, Mendiola worked for Bloomberg in Washington, D.C. and London. She holds a master's from Central St. Martin's University of the Arts, London, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Georgetown University. I'm Kelly Young, Associate Director of Strategic Engagement and Alumni Relations, and I'll be facilitating today's program. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. This program is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel within 48 hours of today's broadcast. You will receive the link to the recording in a follow-up email. María Luisa will answer questions at the end of the presentation. Please send in your questions using the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. If you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please also submit those concerns to me via the questions section of that control panel. Without any further ado, I'm pleased to turn things over to María Luisa.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. My name is María Luisa Mendiola. I went to Georgetown and graduated in 2012. Ever since then, I've been working really hard in my own body love journey. And as Kelly mentioned, I am the founder of Miga Swimwear, the first of its kind swimwear line inspired by the stories of women that have disfigurement, but also disabilities and chronic illness. And I'm originally from San Jose, Costa Rica. This webinar will be under 30 minutes. We'll start by framing the problem of body image and then discussing the causes for poor body esteem, as well as the creation of self-concept. We'll then delve into real life scenarios. Then we'll have a reflection period. So I hope that you have handy a journal and something to write with. And then we'll finish up with tactics that you can take away after our webinar, as well as a Q&A section. We'll start first with a poll. I would like to know, have you experienced moments of unhappiness with the way your body looks? Right now, you're going to get to answer the poll. And once you finish answering the poll, we'll close the poll and we'll share the results with you. Okay. Okay, so poll results are, have you experienced moments of unhappiness with the way your body looks? And the answer is 100% of you guys said yes. So this is not far off from my research, from what my research has shown. Actually, we've seen that over 79% of Americans report feeling unhappy with how their body looks, and 32% of them went at the beach wearing a bathing suit. And of course, it's very interesting to me to think, why is it that an article of clothing make us feel so vulnerable? Is it because we're close to being naked? Is it because there's a way that we've been told directly or indirectly through the media, perhaps, of how our body needs to look before we go to the beach or the pool? Now we're going to go ahead and do another poll about this meme. You probably have seen some of these memes around since we've all been in quarantine. And I would like to know what feelings does this meme trigger? So once again, you'll see the pop-up for the poll show up. You can select one or more of these options, and we'll share the results once all of you guys have participated. Okay. Okay, so 50% of you guys said guilt. 44% of you said sadness and anxiety. 39% said shame, and 11% said envy. That's very interesting. I think the reason why we keep seeing a lot of these memes around is obviously because gyms have been closed. Maybe we've been baking more than often. I know I have. Or we've been eating a lot of frozen pizza. Whatever it is, these memes have been all over social media. And every single time we see one of these memes, these thoughts in our head are getting cemented that aside from all of the other concerns that we have about being a global pandemic, unemployment, all of these things, on top of that, we should add the concern that we'll look differently or worse by the time we leave our house, by the time quarantine ends. So I think it's very interesting. I also seen through the media the term quarantine 15, like freshman 15. And again, these are times where we need to really contest these memes and really, make sure that in our mind it's clear that this is a joke that is maybe funny for some, but it doesn't need to apply to us, and it doesn't need to define who we are right now or how we're going to look after quarantine. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my personal experience with my body and my body journey. I was born with Jones syndrome, which affects 1 out of 100,000 babies. Some of that results in reduced lung capacity, short limbs. For me, it translating into having short limbs as well as brachymetatarsia, which means that I have short fourth toes. Growing up in Costa Rica, there were many times when I had the opportunity to be barefoot, right, at the beach or at the pool. And I always felt so uncomfortable because my feet did not look like everyone else's. I felt vulnerable. I felt isolated. Even at Georgetown, I avoided wearing flip-flops. I would hide my feet from my roommates. It was a lifetime of concealing. And something in me when I turned 26 was like, I cannot keep concealing this or hiding this because it's exhausting. It was a time where like I was constantly thinking, are these people that I trust? Do I not trust? Can I be barefoot at their house? Can I not be barefoot at their house? So because of that, I decided to focus my life's work into understanding the psychology of appearance. And one of the terms that really interested me when I was doing my research was body esteem, which is the self-evaluations of one's body's or appearance. Now, I want us to focus on the word self-evaluations, right? Because this is how we rate our body, but also how we believe others rate our bodies plays into how we feel about our body or an overall appearance. I also think it's important for you to know that body esteem is incredibly fluid, meaning that within the same hour, even the same minute, you can feel awesome about your body or very comfortable. And then all of a sudden, you maybe see one of those quarantine memes, and then you're not feeling so great about yourself. Now I want to talk a little bit about the causes for poor body esteem. So first of all, family. I want to focus on one in particular that caught my attention that I read about in the Oxford Handbook of the Psychology of Appearance, where it said that a child would give much more importance to the comments of the family's breadwinner. So for example, the family's breadwinner makes a comment about the child's height or appearance or weight, then that kind of comment is going to weigh more on that child than the parent who's not a breadwinner making the same comment. Same goes, another cause of poor body esteem is also culture and media. Of course, a lot of us have heard about the pervasive effects of seeing certain beauty standards on TV, on the magazines, but I want to draw attention to this. 6 to 10 American movie villains have some time of disfigurement. So this, from a very young age, we're being told that if you have some sort of attribute that makes you look different, then you are equated to something that is maybe evil or negative or bad. I then want to talk about income as a cause for body esteem, right? So if a family's top priority is to put food on the table, meaning they don't have disposable income. Then whether our kids fit in or not in school, whether our kids are considered pretty or not in school, is not going to be a top of priority. Whether if you come from a family who does have disposable income, how your kids look might have a greater importance, and you might want your kids to fit in more and give that more priority than in families who don't have disposable income. And lastly, public health. We've all seen campaigns that talk about the wonders of keeping a low body fat and not as much weight, or emphasize techniques not to gain weight. But these sometimes end up having the opposite effect. I know, for example, I've been to a doctor that has told me that I am overweight for my height. And so all of these things, even though they have a good intention, are actually causing me to have a poor body esteem. Now, another term I want to talk about is self-concept, an idea of the self constructed from one's beliefs or the responses of others. I like to think of self-concept as self-identity, right? And this is concerning to me because we're letting how other people think, or the things that other people say about me, affect who I am and who I become, my identity. And this can be incredibly limiting of what we think that we can or cannot achieve. And the bottom line here is that appearance matters. In the disfigurement community, there's a lot of research that has been done. For example, we know that last year there was 1.9 million loss in productivity for people living with skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis. We know that a third of people living with disfigurement have been discriminated at work. And so because we know we now have some numbers to attribute to the impact of having these preconceived notions of the value of people and depending on how they look, we need to pay attention to this, and we need to create and raise awareness about this. So that's kind of where we come in, the work that I do at Miga Swimwear. I want to talk to you a little bit about, first of all, stories of resilience and how that idea came to be. From my experience of working with a lot of women that have different types of disfigurement, disabilities, and chronic illnesses, what you would call extreme cases, even though this is being insecure about our body, from our poll results, from research, we know that this is a universal experience, right? But I firmly believe that able-bodied people that don't have disfigurement, people that don't have chronic illnesses, can actually learn to love and accept themselves through the lessons of resilience of the communities who've had it more difficult in when it comes to appearance. So that's kind of where the idea of stories of resilience came to be. But also from working with this community, I've also understood the importance of language and the role that language plays in making sense of your experience. For example, one time when I was working with a burn survivor, she told me, she described her burn injury as how she had laid baking on the radiator because of an epileptic attack she had. Now, for some, using those words is incredibly graphic, but for her is therapeutic. And so that's kind of where I started getting this idea that if we come up with a succinct story as to why we look the way we do, when people ask, or when we want to disclose, it'll be much more easier and thus lower stigma. So we work with women who, again, have all sorts of types of disfigurements and disabilities and chronic illnesses. For example, Kat, who is the lady here on this slide. Kat is a burn survivor. She suffered 3 to 4 degree burns in her leg and feet during a kitchen accident. And we worked together to create a story that she could tell when her relatives or acquaintances will ask her, why do you look like this now, right? And for her, we also designed a bathing suit with a cover up that protected the donor side that you can see is in her thigh. And so as a result of our collaboration, now she feels like she doesn't need to hide her scars. She loved in particular that she got to meet other burn survivors and feel empowered from their own experience. Again, and so this idea that we really don't need to have the same conditions. We don't need to necessarily have disability or disfigurement or chronic illness to empathize, understand, but also heal and learn how to love and accept ourselves. Another example I want to talk about is Colette. Colette is the lady in the black bathing suit. She was born with a tumor in her butt and in her butt cheek, and which caused her to have an asymmetrical butt. And this condition, by the way, is incredibly rare. It happens to 1 out of 40,000 babies. And so for her, we created a story where she could finally tell this secret, right? This thing that she could hide all year round if she wanted to, which made her feel like she no longer had to live under the veil. And for her, we designed a tankini set with a matching skirt that would allow her to conceal or disclose whenever she wants to. Because again, as I said, body esteem is incredibly fluid. She doesn't have to be disclosing to everyone if she doesn't feel comfortable, right? So we designed this tankini set with a matching skirt, and this also happens to be a favorite style for wheelchair users like our model Bree. Now, Colette teaches body confidence lessons in schools in LA. So again, we believe that our customers that may or may not have these health conditions can learn from these stories of resilience. They can learn from these extreme cases on how to own their story and thus lower stigma or lower their insecurities. Now we're gonna go into the reflection part of this presentation. I will start reading the questions, and you can start writing your answers. Obviously, you can revisit them later. And so I'll just make sure that I'm pause myself enough so that you can have time to write down. So for the first question, name and describe the place you're most comfortable at. This is important for you to think about where is it exactly that you feel the most comfortable, and why is it that you feel comfortable there? For question number 2, is there an activity you've always wanted to do but have been unable to do so because of your appearance? If so, what activity is it? And here we're talking again about self-concept or self-identity, and how sometimes our appearance or what we believe that what we believe we are can lead us to have limiting beliefs of what we can achieve. For question number 3, name 3 experiences in your life that you believe have helped the development of your self-concept. Again, self-concept being the idea of the self constructed by your beliefs and that of others. Number 4, from 0, not at all, to 10, extremely, how comfortable do you feel about your body? Think about maybe how you would have answered this question 5 years ago, and how do you think you would answer the question 5 years from today? For question number 5, think about the part of your body you dislike the most. What are the feelings that this part triggers? So what part is it? Why? And what are the feelings that it triggers? And lastly, how would you describe this feeling to someone that has never felt it? And what we're trying to get to here is we're trying to tap into the self-awareness, right? Peeling the layers of the complexity of the feelings that a single part in your body or maybe your appearance in general can trigger. And why is that? Where does that come from? And the reason it's important for us to have this reflection, it's because so much of our life happens and we never take time to really be, first of all, aware of where we are in terms of loving ourselves, our body, our self-esteem, but then also, where do we want to be? Because a big part of my experience, I felt that if I didn't get comfortable with my disfigurement, I was gonna bring that and pass that on to my future kids, and I didn't want that. So that's part of the reason why reflection is so important. Now, just to finish up, before we go to the Q&A, I'll just want to leave you with some tactics that you can take away after this webinar. First of all, surround yourself with a support group where you can share honestly how you're feeling about your body. It's important that you find a group of close friends that can lift you up and not bring you down. So make sure that you really know the people that you're venting to about your body and that they come with compassion and are well-intentioned. Have a clear purpose of why you want to look differently. Is it because you have an event coming up? Is it because maybe you have a health condition that you want to get healthier for? And also keep in mind that self-awareness is what curbs our negative self-talk. Again, self-awareness curbs our negative self-talk. It is so important to practice activities that increase your self-awareness, like breathing exercises and meditation, so that you can be much more self-aware, so that when you go down the rabbit hole and start being really negative and start the negative self-talk, you can challenge those thoughts. If you take anything from this webinar, it's to please, the body love journey is a challenging but rewarding one. Please dedicate some time to it. So now we'll go ahead into Q&A section. Okay, so thank you, Judith, for your question. There's plenty of books that I recommend. The one that I mentioned in particular, which is the Oxford Handbook for the Psychology of Appearance. Although it's like a very academical book, to me, it was very helpful in really understanding the long-lasting effects that having a difference in appearance has in building your identity and your psychology. Another book that I love is I think it's called The Body That Heals Itself. So that's definitely another book that I would recommend, and that's just like, it makes you very aware of traumas that your body carries with it. And I may be butchering the name, so I'm happy to share it afterwards with Kelly so that she can share it with you guys. But yeah, that book is great at understanding the long-lasting effects and trauma in the body and how the body how the body reacts to it. Then we have we also got a request to share the questions again. Happy to do that too. And I think, Kelly, you're going to be sending them around. I think the presentation is going to be on YouTube, but they're the questions. I just went back to that slide. Then, okay. I think this is a great question. So I struggled as an undergrad at Georgetown. It seemed like I was the only morbidly obese individual. I believe I am still considered obese, but sometimes I wonder if the culture at Georgetown, a lot of people who are pretty, thin, affluent, contributes to a negative body esteem. And I'm wondering if you could talk about your experience at Georgetown, specifically with body esteem, pros and cons. This is a great question. As I briefly mentioned, I didn't want to talk at all about my disfigurement. I actually concealed as much as I could. I remember when it came to senior year and we had a trip where a lot of us from the senior class were going. One of my biggest concerns is that people were going to see the disfigurement in my feet. But then I realized that not a lot of people were paying attention. There were a lot of distractions, other distractions much more important than, my feet. But I will say that I did feel like there was a certain type, what's it called? Like the Jack and the Jane Hoya. I think that's something that absolutely the description that you're giving me right now, which is thin, pretty, and affluent. And I think, as a lot of schools, it really is about finding a group of people, which I did find at Georgetown, that made me feel good about myself. A group, especially within, in my experience with having friends that I didn't feel like we were competing against each other, that we were so excited to be in the presence of each other and so excited about each other's accomplishments that we could just elevate one another. And that took time. That's not something that happened overnight. I didn't love my I wasn't there freshman year because I transferred, but I didn't love my sophomore year floor. So I had to restart and make new friends the junior year. But I think that what helped me the most at Georgetown in terms of building my body confidence, my self-esteem, is that I came from a very I came when I was in high school in Costa Rica, I felt like everyone was my size, my height. So I'm 5 foot tall. I'm not too tall, and everyone was my size, my height, but I was the only one who was a little more curvier. And you know, I had thicker legs and a butt, and I always felt very self-conscious about that growing up. But then when I came to school in the US, there was so much more diversity that I felt much more comfortable in being myself and being in my own body. And at that point, I hadn't started really delving into my disfigurement. And I do think that not Georgetown, but my maturity level had not made me, you know, that my disfigurement has been something that I would just like push under the rug and try not to think about and try not to bring up or show to anybody. So I think it's more of where I was when I was at Georgetown, but absolutely like the pros I would say is the diversity that I felt was in Georgetown compared to my hometown in San Jose, Costa Rica, where I felt everyone was like, yes, small like me, but very, very thin. Um, and I would say the cons, yeah, I do think that there is this Jane Hoya stereotype exists, and it could be to everyone's detriment. And I think the more the school becomes more diverse, the better it is for everybody. Let's see. I think we have another question. Okay, I like this question. So this question is more about our business. How do you market your swim line? Why should someone buy your swimwear versus a suit from another company, not focused on this population? Yeah, so how we market it is by using the words that carry a lot of negative connotation and trying to flip them on their head. So as I mentioned, like the word disfigurement for a lot of people is very uncomfortable. And the whole reason I think that is because historically we've attached a negative connotation to it. What we're trying to do is disrupt that, basically saying disfigurement is something beautiful and it's something that we're using to inspire the bathing suits, the fashion that we're trying to create. um, I think that especially with coronavirus, we'll see now much more of people moving into supporting brands that are led by a mission. And I think that's really what differentiates us. We are the only swimwear brand out there that designs with the input of the disfigurement, disability, and chronic illness community. But on top of that, make sure that their story is part of their designs as a way to helping them cope with their difference in appearance and as a way of educating society and educating people who want to learn about what this experience is about and want to be allies of this community. We have another question. Have you seen any memes that are body esteem positive during coronavirus and that are helpful, worth sharing? Not at the top of mind. I don't know of any memes. A lot of them that I've seen, I know there was one about yeah, I haven't seen a particular one on body esteem, but I'll definitely keep an eye out. Okay, we now have a question from Callie. Could you tell us more about how MIGA has become a player contributor in the disfigurement community and how your work has brought disfigurement and body esteem into more public discourse? Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first example that comes to mind briefly is when we had our launch party last December. We actually had it in a small bar in New York City, and the owner of the bar actually had to take the ramp out for the first time. We actually got featured in Forbes because of this, because a lot of bars in New York City say that they're compliant with the Disabilities Act, but they're not. And this bar in particular had a ramp, but they had never used a ramp before because they had never had anyone with a wheelchair come to that bar, right? And so once our model Bree came in her wheelchair, well, the bar was happy that they actually got to test it because the ramp was not great. But what I'm trying to say here is, like, when you start bringing in people who look differently, who have different abilities into the spaces, you are immediately educating everybody else, because at this point, I think all bars in every city should be accessible, and it shouldn't depend on a brand to ask for the bar to do that. But it did, and it made a difference. And so what we end up doing is having a conversation first about the disfigurement community, which is my personal experience, a community that, as opposed to in the UK, where they have an organization in particular that advocates for people with disfigurement. We don't have that here in the US. We have a lot of different organizations. And the problem when you have different organizations is that it's really hard to understand the numbers, how many of us actually have disfigurement in the US. I could only tell you how many people have skin conditions, how many people have burn injuries, but the total number of us, it's unknown. And I think once we start putting numbers to the community, we can start leverage and advocating stronger for the community. And for me, it was always very clear that what I wanted to do was make the secret that I always felt like I had to hide, something that I thought was something to be ashamed for, actually bring it forward, make it the first thing that comes out in conversation, make it something that I'm proud of, something that is beautiful, something that is actually inspirational. Okay. Okay, I think we have 2 more questions. This one's from Betty. Do you feel that you have successfully overcome negative body image, or is it an ongoing endeavor? I think it's an ongoing endeavor. As I mentioned at the end of the presentation, it's a challenging but very rewarding journey to really try to challenge these preconceived ideas of how we tie so much of our self-worth to how we look, right? As females, we've been told so much that, are you beautiful? But are you pretty? Why does it have to start with that? And when you start questioning these preconceived thoughts and this negative self-talk that you might have, you just get better at challenging them. But I think it's an ongoing endeavor, definitely. Okay, and then I think this is our last question. Do you think you will branch into developing other fashion designs? Absolutely. We're looking right now at, first of all, we want to expand in our plus sizing. We also want to go into men's swimwear, children's swimwear. And again, I think it's important to explain why we started in swimwear. I actually met with a clinical psychologist at a burns unit, and she told me that burn survivors were having trouble finding bathing suits. And then the more and more I got to talk to people who had different types of disfigurement, like facial palsy, we talked to people who had different types of disabilities, chronic illnesses like Crohn's disease. We started to realize, a lot of people feel uncomfortable in their bathing suits, and how better to kind of reclaim this therapeutic and relaxing space like the beach and the pool is, than making empowering bathing suits that tell stories and break stigmas and really boost people's self-esteem. I think those are all of our questions for right now. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for Kelly and the Georgetown University alumni community for allowing me to present and for this awesome opportunity.
Thank you, Maria Luisa, for taking time to discuss this important topic with our community. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and will join upcoming webinars. Please look out for our follow-up email, which will include more information on upcoming events, as well as a feedback survey and link to today's recording. Thanks again, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.